Hello and welcome to Merlin's Manor. One of my favorite solo board games is Final Girl, and today I'm going to be giving my thoughts on Series 3, starting with an overview of the feature films and the vignette, and then ranking the killers and locations, and finally going over the accessories pack and guest stars. Let's dive right into the overview for the various feature films. Now I've attempted to order the feature films from least complex to most complex for the overview, though the first two could arguably be switched as there isn't a clear least complex this time around like there was in Series 1 and Series 2. And also the more complex ones are also still a bit subjective. The first one I'm going to talk about is Don't Make a Sound, which gives a Quiet Place meets Tremors vibe. In this one you are in a desert town called Utopia, and there is an alien creature called the Eyeless that responds to noise. Every card you play makes noise, and certain items make either no noise, one noise, or three noise, depending on how loud that item is. Then some of the cards in the Terror deck will change what the Eyeless does if you make a certain amount of noise that turn. The Eyeless itself moves fast and does quite a bit of damage right from the start. The location also has you drawing two Sand Snake cards after the killer phase to determine where the Sand Snakes are going to pop up, and they'll do one damage to someone in that space, of course killing victims because they can only take one damage if there's a victim there. There are a few rocky terrain spaces that are safe from the Sand Snakes, but the snakes can pop up literally anywhere else and kill a victim, hurt you, or even hurt the killer. There's also the danger of sinkholes forming and killing victims and hurting you or the killer if you or the killer are in that space when it collapses. The sinkhole also makes it so that no one can enter that space anymore. The location is dangerous and so is the killer, but the rules themselves are fairly simple in this one. The biggest difficulty when it comes to playing is remembering to flip those cards for the snakes during the upkeep and remembering to move the noise tracker for every action that you do. Plus there's a certain amount of discretion when it comes to deciding if an item is quiet, does one noise, or does two noise. The next one I'm going to talk about is Hell to Pay, which has a similar complexity to Don't Make a Sound. This one gives Hellraiser vibes as you take on Razorface in the Hellscape. Razorface has afflictions that you must accomplish before you can kill him, which basically gives you tasks to complete and then some sort of consequence to face. The actions are things like save 3 victims at once, do at least 3 damage to Razorface, achieve your ultimate ability, or even things like instead of saving a victim, the victim is killed, or when you attack Razorface, instead do damage to a victim in that space or an adjacent space. Now you start out with 3 afflictions, but you may have to add 1 or 2 more during the game. Once you complete all the afflictions, you are then free to take out the killer. The Hellscape's main thing is there are 4 tiles that will switch places or flip throughout the game based on the rolling of 2 4-sided dice during the upkeep phase. You can also play a Hellscape action card to switch tiles around, and some terror cards will cause them to move as well. Sometimes your plans get messed up because the tiles move, and sometimes the killer will even get separated from you or victims because of this. And sometimes the killer is brought right next to you. The location also has a central location called the Nexus, which is both a search space and an exit space, which can make it easier to save people since it's a central location whenever there's at least a clear path to that center at least. Now the items for this one are among some of the most unique items for Final Girl. The biggest difficulties for this one from a complexity standpoint are remembering to roll those Hellscape dice each phase and keeping in mind that you can only solve 1 affliction per turn. You also get rid of and draw a new affliction if an affliction becomes impossible to accomplish, such as saving victims when there are no victims left. And if you ever run out of afflictions when you need to draw one, then you will automatically lose. Next is the Merrick Murders, which gives Saw vibes. This one takes place in a warehouse with all of the doors starting out locked. There are 3 click terror cards that will come up to unlock the 3 exits during the game, plus certain items and events that can help you unlock the door so that you can then save victims as well. The warehouse also features racks that you can climb on and leap from one to the other to more quickly cross the warehouse. The Tormentor is the killer, and this killer does not start out on the board and will not show up until the finale. One victim starts in a trap, and terror cards will often put other victims trapped as well, and even the Final Girl can become trapped throughout the game. In order to rescue a victim from a trap, you must be in the same space with that victim and perform various tasks in order to free them. Some causing you to spend time, some causing you to move, and some causing you to use an attack card. If you become trapped, then you of course cannot move around until you escape that trap. Each trap has a countdown until the person in the trap is killed, and with each tick of the trap there is going to be a negative consequence. If the victim dies from the trap, then there's going to be a major consequence. And if you die from the trap, it's game over, man. Some of the final girl traps will have you take damage as a consequence of being in the trap or even to escape the trap. The killer in this one does not have a lot of health, nor does she do much damage herself, and she does not personally attack you, nor can she be attacked until that finale is revealed. But her traps can be quite deadly, and at the very least they become a distraction from making the preparations that you need to make before the finale comes along. One of the more complex of this series is the Falconwood Files, which gives a Stranger Things vibe. The location is a town, and the killer is called the Slayer. The Slayer drags victims into a mirror dimension before killing them. He can only target and attack victims that are in the mirror dimension, though he has a certain connection to the final girl, which allows him to be able to attack her anywhere, whether she's in his dimension or not. You have cards that allow you to open a rift into the mirror dimension so that you can go into the mirror dimension to rescue victims and to deal damage to the killer. In some ways, this is similar to Dr. Fright, except instead of resting to enter his dimension, you are opening a rift. And also, you don't have that little boiler room minigame, but instead will lose 1 heart if you are in the mirror dimension still during the upkeep. And the fact that he can also attack you in the regular dimension also makes a little bit of a difference there. You can freely exit the mirror dimension during the action phase, but if your action phase ends abruptly while you're still in the mirror dimension, you will be stuck there until the next action phase, and so you'll lose a heart. The big complexity boost for this feature film comes in the missions that you have to complete for the location before you can take down the killer. There are 5 different missions, each with their own setup and rules, with an ally that you unlock for completing the mission. While this certainly adds to the uniqueness and the replayability, it also adds to setup time and complexity quite a bit. Finally, we have The Killer from Tomorrow, which gives Terminator 1 and 2 vibes. This cybernetic organism from the future has come back in time to kill the Savior, and you must protect him. If he dies, the game is lost. And at first, he doesn't trust you, and so you cannot save him, and he will also do things to either lead him to be more likely to die or cause problems for you. You play build trust cards, and as you build trust with him, you're able to have him perform actions, and eventually his cards, which are played during the upkeep phase, lead to him doing something beneficial instead of the bad things. The killer focuses on the final girl for a lot of its actions, but as long as the Savior is on the board, that focus then switches to the Savior, so it can quickly get to the Savior and kill him if you don't act fast. Once you take down the Mark V killer, there is a couple of rounds of cooldown before the Mark X comes out, which is like the advanced killer in Terminator 2. The first killer takes 6 damage to shut down, whereas the Mark X takes 15 damage. You can also repair the Mark V to make him your ally, much like he becomes the ally in Terminator 2. The Savior is tied to the location and not the killer, so you will play with him whenever you play at the Sunny Days Mall. The Sunny Days Mall features a food court in the middle that is on the lower area with railing spaces up top, and if anyone takes damage in a railing space, they fall over into the food court and take an extra damage for the fall. If someone takes a damage in a shop, then they are knocked through a wall and take an additional damage for that. You can also jump down into the food court, but you risk a damage as you roll a d6 and take damage on 1 to 4. So those are the feature films. Now I'm going to briefly talk about the Vignette Terror from Destiny before ranking the killers and locations. The vignettes only come with a killer, not with a location, and this one doesn't really even come with a traditional killer. The vignette gives vibes of Final Destination, as you have various special fated victims who are fated to die in a certain order. And you have to try to figure out that order and save them in the proper order. If they die before you save them, then there will be a consequence at the end of the game that you have to meet, which if you cannot meet those consequences, then you're going to suffer a punishment of losing hearts. Also, if you save the victims in the wrong order, then they will die and there will be consequences. There is no killer attacking throughout the game, so you don't have to worry about taking damage from a killer or attacking a killer. Instead of attacking a killer, you will be using these premonition cards to help determine the order to save victims in or discover other hidden information, including consequences and punishments, and then trying to save victims before their fated victim card is drawn and save them in that right order. If you can't save a victim, you are going to want to discover the consequence so that you can try to be able to meet it at the end of the game. If you fail to meet enough of the consequences for unsaved, fated victims, then you will lose too much health and you will die and lose the game. This game plays quite differently from the way Final Girl normally plays and really offers a somewhat diverse way of tackling the game system, as you can focus on trying to save the victims, or you can focus more on being ready for those consequences, or some mix of both. I think this one is really going to be hit or miss for a lot of Final Girl fans since it plays so differently. I personally appreciate the change-up this offers from the usual way of playing, but some will find it too much running around and not enough taking down a killer. I'm not going to include this one in my killer rankings currently, but I may eventually try to figure out where I'd place it when I do my full ranking of all the killers. For now, I really don't know where I place this one since it just plays so differently. Now let's get into the killer rankings, and this one has been harder for me to do than the previous series since they all in some way felt fairly close on that same level. I would also like to say before I get into the rankings that overall I would place Series 3 between Series 2 and Series 1 in my ranking, with Series 2 still being my favorite series overall, followed by Series 3 and then Series 1. Also, if Bad Times at Buddyland is any indication, I'm likely going to be placing Series 4 on that same level as Series 2. But I'll have to see how that all shakes out as the rest of Series 4 comes out. Now let's get into my rankings of the killers for Series 3, starting with the Tormentor at number 5. The Tormentor was one of my favorites at first. It has a very unique gameplay style. It ultimately fell flat after multiple plays. It can become too easy to beat as you have the entire game to prepare, and the killer only has 7 health. And the finale where she just locks the doors is super easy. I ultimately discovered the key is not to worry too much about trapped victims. Save them if it's convenient, otherwise the result of them dying is not that big of a deal. It's often easier to deal with the consequences of them dying over trying to get to them and doing the various tasks to save them. One standout part is the Final Girl traps that added some extra suspense, and you have to escape from them or else you lose. Plus, you can't do anything significant while you are in the trap. The stakes are much higher for the Final Girl traps than the victim traps. At number 4 is the Eyeless. I hardly ever really cared about the sound mechanism. First, you can typically make 3 sound and be fine for most of the game. Second, sound-related tarot cards didn't come up often enough to really feel like they mattered, though if they did come up at the wrong time, they could be devastating. The big thing about the Eyeless is that it discards tarot cards a lot, especially when playing at Utopia with the snakes killing victims. So it rushes the finale. It does have a lot of health and can do a lot of damage, so there's a solid risk. I'd say overall this killer is fine, but nothing too special. The challenge is how quick the finale comes around with discarding tarot cards and how fast and how deadly the Eyeless is. Coming in at number 3 is Razorface. At first I thought this was going to be my least favorite. He's pretty basic and I'm not a fan of the source material. The main thing he has going for him is the Affliction cards, which gives you 3 tasks that you must complete before you can defeat him. Sometimes others get added as well. The Afflictions themselves are often fairly easy to complete, so it can feel more like busy work than a strong challenge. The fact that you can only complete 1 in a round does add some depth to the strategy planning on how you're going to handle things. Some do require you to change your gameplay some, such as saving 3 victims at once, so you have to bring 3 victims together on a space before saving them. Some require you to kill a victim instead of doing damage to Razorface, or to kill a victim instead of saving them, something you certainly would rather not do. Also, the consequences for completing the Afflictions sometimes require you to be strategic about when you complete them, especially the one that has you place Razorface in your space, or the one that has you lose a heart. I find Razorface especially shines in Falconwood, as you have 2 side quests now to work on before you can defeat him. You have his afflictions and you have the Falconwood mission, which is quite a bit to juggle and makes the afflictions a bit more of a hassle to complete in a good way. While Razorface isn't the greatest of the killers, he is more interesting than I originally thought him to be, and I'm kind of interested to see how his afflictions play into complicating other locations in Series 2 and Series 1. Now, the second one is the Slayer. Might be a little controversial for the Slayer to be so high, but I enjoy the mechanisms where you have to go into the mirror dimension to attack him, which is coupled with the issue of causing you to lose a heart if you are still there during the upkeep, which can happen on a furious strike or a critical blow with 1 or less success. Also, how he pulls victims into the mirror dimension, causing you to have to go in there if you want to save them before he kills them. And if he gets too many in there, they will automatically start dying when he has to pull a new one in. On the one hand, he is a little basic, but overall the added depth of strategy brought on by the mirror dimension and choosing when and how much you will interact with it makes him a worthwhile opponent. And my number 1 on this list is the Hunter. Combining the Hunter with his location can be brutal, but beyond that, he is fun. He will hyper-focus on the Savior more than any other killer, and so that's not fun, and cause you to lose games in 3 or 4 rounds when playing at Sunny Days. But on the other maps, he's not so bad. I really like how this one works in 2 stages. First, taking out the Mark V, which isn't too hard to take out, especially if you find a good weapon or use the railings or shops in the mall to your advantage. And then you get a break for a couple rounds to recover and prepare for the main event, the Mark X, who has 15 health. I also like how you can recruit the Mark V by repairing it, and then the Dark Power becomes a helpful ability for the Mark V for you. The Mark V can both damage the Mark X and provide protection to you as you whittle down the health of the Mark X. Overall, this is just a very interesting mechanic inspired by the source material, and it works really well to balance the strong Mark X killer. Now let's get into the location rankings, starting with the Sunny Days Mall at number 5. It's a shame I have to place this one so low, as there's a lot I do like about it. I like the way you can knock the killer over the railings and through the walls, and have to be concerned with that happening to you as well. I like the weapons, especially the boomstick and the hand grenades. I like the thematic tie-ins. You've got the flower box with a boomstick being genius, just like in that scene where he takes the shotgun out of the flower box. I like the events and the look of the location. The Savior really ultimately ruins the location overall, though. I get so tired of having to rush to make friends with him or suffer the consequences each round, and having to be worried about him dying and causing me to lose the game. This is especially bad when facing off against the Hunter, who is hyper-focused on him. Once you do make friends with the Savior, you can get some nice benefits, but this doesn't make up for the rush that you are forced to undergo to build trust with him. And also, it doesn't always make thematic sense that the Savior is the target for all the random killers, and probably should have been tied to the Hunter. But then I feel that might have ruined the Hunter in other locations where it wouldn't be as easy to protect the Savior. At least in the mall, you can go and knock the Hunter over the railings to buy you some time. Basically, it's a great location ruined by the Savior mechanism. At number 4 is the Merrick Warehouse. Overall, the location is a little meh. The one highlight being having to work around not being able to save people at first, as all the doors start out locked. Either you have to wait until they unlock from click cards in the Terror deck, or find a weapon that allows you to unlock them, or a zip shows up. Beyond that interesting addition, the location is fairly basic. I wasn't too impressed with the climb and leap. I often ran around the racks and only used climb to go save victims or to use the bowling ball. Now, I did like the bowling ball, though. It was a cool thing that you would climb up on the racks and throw it down on the killer to do damage. Occasionally, the racks work well as a shortcut if you need to cross the entire area. Items and events are okay. Artwork is very plain. And as I said, the locked doors, which pairs well with the Tormentor, is the main thing that stands out. And I do like how that causes you to play a little differently. The rest of the things of the location that they have to offer, I can either take or leave. The third one here is Hellscape. Some of the most unique items in the game, and this really elevates this to number 3. I am not a huge fan of the switching tiles mechanism. Also found it hard to remember for a while. Finally got into the groove of remembering to roll those dice. Sometimes it's anticlimactic, separating the killer from you and the victims for multiple rounds, and sometimes completely ruining your plans, and it's all at random with the roll of the dice. So perhaps hold on to a hellscape action just in case. But then sometimes you buy the hellscape action, don't need it, and just holding on to it for several turns, and you could have better spent that time elsewhere. This location is better than I originally expected, and that mainly comes down to the very interesting items. Coming in at number 2 is Falconwood. This one being so high comes with a caveat. I don't always feel like playing it, and the reason for that comes down to the added setup and extra complexity through the missions. And in general, just requires a bit more mental energy to play. But the missions do add so much that bring it to a whole extra level of play when I do feel like committing that extra energy to playing this location. The 5 missions also add to the replayability of the location, since in addition to the usual things that mix things up, you also have 5 different missions that play differently. The missions also reward you with a powerful special victim for your trouble, though for some of them I find their use mostly lessened by the time that you get them. And a couple of them give you a powerful item as well, which can really help you defeat the killer. It also has some fun items and events with nods to the inspiration material, such as the waffles item and the pizza van event. The pizza van is also a lot of fun to use, as it can help you just get around the board quickly, though your first move is panic, which isn't bad since it adds 2 movement to your movement, and may even adjust your plans a little bit. One of the terror cards is Running Up the Hill, which is a very cool reference. As a fan of Stranger Things, I really appreciate the various references to Stranger Things. It also comes with a 20-sided dice as a reference to D&D, which can be fun to use for the various events and tarot cards that use it. Overall, I'm going to say that this is the most unique of the Series 3 locations and really brings out the theme. It would probably be number 1 if it weren't for the extra setup and mental energy. And my number 1 location for Series 3 is Utopia. Utopia has some good items, including the sniper rifle and elephant gun. The snakes really add an element of tension, as victims could die on any flip of the card, or you could take a hit if you are anywhere other than a rock space. Then again, the killer could also get attacked as well. Sinkholes can cause you to have to change up your travel plans, and you may decide to stop your movement on a rock to be safe from sinkholes and snakes, or you can just risk taking the damage. The unpredictability of this location really does add to the game without feeling like it gets in the way too much, unlike the hellscape, which got annoying at times. The snakes may affect those who like to live dangerously on 1 health to get the extra die more than those who try to stay healthy. I wouldn't say this location blows me out of the water, but it is consistently good and adds a little extra danger and suspense. Now let's close up by talking about some of the extras. First of all, the accessories box comes with a Final Girl dice tray, tier dice, and all the things that relate to the tier mechanism, and an add-on player mat with some extra spaces to place things such as your hand, the dice tray, tokens, and various extra cards. I didn't get this originally with the Kickstarter order because they required it to be bundled with the big box, which I didn't want, but I recently picked it up from my local FLGS for $20. And honestly, the biggest reason for getting this, apart from a certain degree of completionism, was the additional mat, which gives a place for my hand to go, as well as a few other dedicated spaces. But even then, this is far from being as helpful as the big mats, but it is nice to have. I didn't personally need the dice tray, as I have other dice trays, and I often use my Vagrant Song dice tray, which is slightly bigger than the Final Girl one, but this dice tray does work well, and looks nice with just the Final Girl logo on it. The tier dice are one of those things that some may want and others will leave it. I lean into the latter category. At first I was excited about the concept, but then I decided I didn't personally need something to make the game easier. For those who find themselves losing a lot and getting frustrated by that, I can see this as a positive thing that you're going to want, because basically it turns your past failures into future successes as you gain tiers whenever you fail, and then can spend those tiers for benefits later on. I did pull these out and try them out on a scenario that felt practically impossible to beat, and they did actually help me to win that scenario. That scenario is scenario 4 for the Slayer, where you have to save the heroic best friend in order to win. Personally, I don't see myself using them because I feel like Final Girl hits a sweet spot in difficulty for me, and these would make the game generally too easy for me. But if you find yourself discouraged by the difficulty currently, these can give just a slight boost without making things way too easy. It just provides a little extra mitigation for the bad luck throughout the game. Finally, let's look at the guest stars box, which I have them combined into everything combined into the miniatures box here. The stars of this box are the two special Final Girl packs, Grandma's Grudge and Caroline's Revenge. Two Final Girls who play very differently than your traditional Final Girls. Grandma has only 1 health and moves very slowly and takes extra time to move, but she has additional ways to mitigate damage, including being able to guard even for things that would cause her to straight up lose a heart, and she can call victims over to her space to take an attack for her. She can also have victims move and use the victims on the boards to attack the killer. She also comes with 3 special items that she starts the game with. She starts with 1, 2, or 3 of them depending on the difficulty you want to play on. And one item stops the killer when he enters Grandma's space by discarding it. One does a damage to the killer when he enters her space and is discarded. And the other is a weapon that she can throw at the killer with weak attack actions. She has 5 uses of that, and it negates a lost heart if you do damage, and returns weak attack if you get 2 successes. It is quite fun and nerve-wracking to play as Grandma. You are always rolling an extra die, which is fun, but you could die at any time from a single damage getting through. It can also be frustrating to have to travel slower. All sprints and walks are removed and replaced with her own movement cards. It's just really a fun challenge to play with Grandma overall because it changes up the way that you play quite a bit, and she has some interesting extra ways to fight the killer and to defend herself. And then there's Caroline's Revenge, which includes a teenage version of Caroline, the girl you have to rescue in the Poltergeist feature film. She has come back with psychic powers, which gives her a way to fight against and defeat the Poltergeist, and that's the way that you win using her in that feature film. No, she's not trying to find and rescue herself. Against other killers, though, the psychic damage provides an additional way to defeat the killers. You can do standard damage to win, or you can use the new psychic attack cards to do psychic damage, which gives you dice to roll when you're trying to expel the killer's soul. And when you feel like you have done enough psychic damage, you start using the psychic expulsion card, and you roll dice equal to the damage, and if you get more successes than dead victims, then you win. Otherwise, you will eliminate 1 dead victim from the dead pool for each success, lowering the amount of successes you need in the future. And you're free to try again to expel the killer's soul. This gives an additional reason to try to keep victims from dying. I really like that she gives an alternate way to play against the Poltergeist, and I found her interesting to use against multiple killers like the Intruders because you can focus on using psychic damage against some of them and then physical damage against the others. Her save abilities focus on getting her psychic cards for free, and her ultimate allows her to get her psychic expulsion card for free each turn. This is hard to unlock against the Poltergeist though, because she can really run around and kill a lot of victims quickly. Another special action card that Caroline has is the Psychic Teleport card, which allows her to travel anywhere on the board, which can be very handy if you're trying to get away from the killer, or get to the killer quickly, or even just get across the board to a search space or to save a victim. She might be interesting to try against the Tormentor for that very reason. Caroline also comes with a few interesting items, and you choose one to start the game with. Overall, I really like what these 2 special Final Girls add to the game, and I highly recommend getting the Guest Stars box just for them. There's also the Miniatures box, which is good if you want miniatures, but doesn't really add any gameplay elements. Now, what else comes in the Guest Stars box? You have 4 Final Girl promo cards, including Paula Deming and Jamie from Foster the Meeple. It also comes with cards to act as proxy cards for custom events and items that you have made so that they can be shuffled into the deck as normal without being obvious which one are your custom cards. They each have a number on them so you can decide which number relates to each of your homemade events and items, and when that card comes up, you just substitute in your custom card. Now, I don't use custom cards, so this hasn't added anything for me. The pack also comes with 5 new signature action cards, though I personally have not liked these new signature action cards as much as the original ones, and typically don't find myself choosing them or using them if they do come into play in the game. And the way I choose signature action cards is drawing 2 of them and choosing 1 out of the 2. It also comes with vehicle cards for playing against zombies at the Series 3 locations, and 11 secret item envelopes to give you secret items for the promo girls that previously did not have secret items. All in all, I find there is quite a bit of worthwhile stuff in the guest stars box, with some things being a bit more niche as to who will actually use them, but they definitely will be useful for some. And so those are my thoughts on all of the Series 3 items. Let me know in the comments down below what you think of these various killers and locations and the extras. And as always, I hope you've enjoyed this video. Check out a couple of my other Final Girl videos and subscribe if you haven't already done so. And I hope you have a great week and keep on gaming.